million.
So that number that we couldn't determine yesterday is 35 million. But so what it is that there is I think, but then saya gare. Saya gare. And then 13 million. So actually the million, so what it is I guess chewa, which is the word, because they have different, you know how like we have like 1,000, 100,000, a million. So they have words for all of those, but then they also have this thing called chewa, which is I think 10 million. So so whereas that becomes like a new number at 10 million. Yeah. Or no, that doesn't work. It must be because if it's 35 million and then 13 million. But anyway, whatever. She found it and it's 35 million. It's still confusing. I didn't look into it myself, so yeah. Thank you.
And it did mad this on the top, that reminds you to Karisna, Monica, Namjur Perlula, Taka say you, Mima, and both are Manioka say you, the Nepper and Bayan Mad dinner.
So what it is essentially there's kind of like the most elaborate kind of number of channels. The way to think about the channels, like there's the extensive number, and then in the context of practice, it kind of becomes more and more condensed. So for a yogic practitioner, then it sort of gets fully subsumed into, you know, smaller number of channels.
It is not Maduna Tonta, Digitaki.
Tonta Dunchi Tashi. So then, so more condensed than the 13 million, then are the 74,000.
Yeah, this on the didn't call job jet, Sada Jada job jet.
And then that becoming even more condensed, it becomes the 18 chakras and 108 primary branches or petals.
I'm going to Masha de Mataya. They thought to talk a machine and degrees. I'm going to number the party, the Tate, that the hand should deny she. Some color together.
But mainly, and then even further condensed, so it doesn't matter so much like all of these different sort of like the more elaborate and then more and more condensed. The main thing that as yogic practitioners one is dealing with or working with are the 3 channels and the 4 chakras.
And it is no colon out the standard jet. Money.
But rather than the even less condensed than the 4 chakras and 3 channels are the 3 channels and the 5 chakras with 152 primary branches or petals.
Yeah, this no color shit and standard jet and issue.
Or then, you know, even subsuming further, rather than 5 chakras, you have 4 chakras and 120 primary branch channels or petals.
Sem mikpa chanyapa in the sentence.
Yapokoma somchi.
You want the chinkolola, then it should some jet sadu case,
some sadu
and make up the poetry. Some just sado lanta, some just sado
chuto lapi, some just sado, then nyamjo.
Nyamjo can make up the poetry legis. Cola at the sentence of your. Take any gaps of Poland. Talpa dini madepa. Musa saja jina ponda lagumare. Pena poade nashite jina pondora.
Yine yang chitsu sumchisoni yaboku.
De karesna da jutsu sumche soni de sari. Sumche de jin ko jutsu sumche zani soni ma ya zani anda de. Nishi zani.
Chitsu mare de tsa.
Mare jutsu re. Tako jutsu der sari karesna. De nyamja de kapsa da karesna. Puati zike lete yora, te jidu takpar dine made payasan juyak lesya, chutu tina nite chigiris, tani, chutu chara, pena chutu chara te chigiri, nishar te chigiri yora, chutu sumche zani na kor nyumjoke nekade puati zike lesigiris. Dine maso na chang kaja hakonsa. Drupon lom ju kolo la pochi jodo ni churje ne ka se ta del aga de poari da suka de ni churje ne ta po la ya de la sa di ba yo atan de yo ja ta ri de nyom jo ki na ga de ni sen zo ga de ni cha nya ba la de chu sem che so na ni don de yo ja ka cha muso pena kanjila korita kalasana nima tela niko kaje mato ni sarvara niko kala na jikata ta chiro kala divata so odi semsen zoni ke let desigres
Niko medo. Yang tutu lagi.
so te kale ko yo
Yeah.
semsen zoni ko yo
Yeah, Samsung hako gyo. The chitsu sumchisoni dine nyomjo gam poa gam.
jiran pe jaso
Yeah.
nyame je kapsala jo de chin kolo de yora color Kolo de lleva tagres. Tapena mutolena tatape yasune. Desa tino maiba. Desa tino madeba. Ina tapena muto. Nima tino nigon kala tasari. Tepe lan hakole. Nima tino nigon kala pasesari.
Ningun kala timache.
Yeta. Asuro te lleva tana. Sudugona kala sari mata nigon kala yanjar sakne. Ina jiri sem zoni le jiba de jo de chin kolo ke le jin de sem zoni ni polan tapar de made pen jo at gres de su de jo de chin kolo kolo ne kapsa sem zoni e kap chu sem tani mano ni jo at gres
Oh, okay.
adini mano na ha
Yini yang nyomjo katla.
nyom sin sem zoni ko
Nyomjo sena chapa jebe katla.
Mare titolo chaupache kaso zan chaupache kaso kogore tata ko marite ina nyom jokyo ne kaso pwa jesi lado pwa la iti miti tena mara ka jela tena e joga de tena yado ko ta ara de gora nyom jokyo sem zonji tata nyom jolo kogo nyom jok kaso sem zonji de joga Чуть не хитайте на хватит this.
This is super not making sense to me, so sorry. But we will do our best. So there is so with the wheel of
Drupon lom tu jo de chin kolo de roheti ta Drupon lom tu jin kolo de kolo po ju ning churte ne kap de malam ji ji le chigris ta kare sin de 포알아야 될 것은 저와터봐. 지워잡아. 내가 그 뇽족 시디 뇽족 내가 포아지지래다들 저와터봐. 뇽족 저와터. 내 저와터 그래서 추추 신체단이 저거래스. 아유라 이 나시고 된 그래서 리바 롱주주 콜로 때 애니 다 리바 터서 포아지는 단 저와터봐.
주소 주도.
주주 뭐도 포아 주로 철신다 니카게 철줘야겠더니 얘가 좀 말람 지지지래시기래시 앞에는 철라나 때나 무슨 철반은 지지 그래 말람 지금 가서는 말람 때 아니 제마다 말람 니념때 야서를 Then you church, Nimagal Churpana, Mata Talpa, the Nipanita. And you all this song, Joma the Maul, the Tsa Lung, Jackie,
So in any case, it just what does make sense of this is that so we have at the crown or in the crown chakra, which is the wheel of great bliss, which is comprised of the 32 kind of main channels coming off of the central channel, and connected with this. So there's something that's connected with time, like every 32 hours, there is something involving the state of transition and change. So like Poa, for instance, which actually literally is referring to, transformation or transition and change. And the state of union is also kind of connected with this. And you have the mind and the mental arisings. And so the identity simdang simjungla tatum yakokomaso.
Sendang Senjoni Mipa Chanyaba, Ipa Chanyu.
So the mind and mental arisings are like in a state of equality. I think what it is that they're sort of almost like mental arisings maybe are dormant, like they're not, they're equal. There's an equality there. And then, so yeah, there was some things that did not make sense to me at all in what she was saying, but that's what I got. And then with the throat chakra, so we also, which is the wheel of enjoyment, and this is connected with the dream state. So the dream state, and so there's both like the illusory appearances of the waking state, sort of the illusions, the kind of delusory appearances of the waking state, and then the delusory appearances of the dream state. And this is a channel, or this chakra has this 16 kind of root branch chakras that are coming off of the main, or channels coming off of the main, or the central channel. And yeah,
There are Drupon Palkyi.
So I think the main thing to get from this is that, like, so each of the chakras are connected with different states of experience. So for instance, the wheel of great bliss is connected with the state of transition, transference, and union. I think like, yeah, sexual union, I think. And then the wheel at the throat is connected with Nintu Dang Milam Nika Rawa Tenda de Jambala. No, so not the just connected with the dream state. So that is particularly connected with the phenomena of the dream state. Sorry? And so then at the heart, you have the Dharma chakra or the wheel of Dharma with the 8 channels, main channels or petals. And this is particularly connected with the 8 sessions throughout the day and transformation of ignorance in the deep sleep state. So the state that this one is particularly connected with is the state of deep sleep.
Drupon Palkyi, but shape nega ni shape
So then the wheel of emanation, which is at the navel with 64 branches. So there's, she said, so before, whereas the one she had mentioned before, actually the waking state, but this is the one that is connected with the state of the waking, the experience of the waking state is the wheel of emanation at the navel.
It doesn't yearn should have here. It doesn't some Akatan Hugan Girida, it doesn't call it. And it long that long that long long somebody long nail Jeper Satan the Never. Some of where is certainly you have to get a long year to take down to get juries, Sate Tercarisina. Sate Tatama Poshega, the Comiamari. That's also the Sa. The Zoboloka say you the Mara Paramba in the shed. Ni long ni have to tell a long year to take down to get juries.
You Nishitsaji la yabo kande the guidance in the
Nishitsaji Nessun to Son Yora. Martina ranking with the Guaji Chamado. Sate la Parisman of the Tassum Jason, the name of the season son, gender like the mother and take gender Hijago.
So there's also like a lot of kind of connections between there's the outer mandala, kind of the outer the macrocosm, if you will, with the all of the, for instance, 32 sacred places and the 24 holy sites. And then those are also reflected inwardly. We have also that mandala in our body. And so there's kind of a breakdown of the different ways in which this is. So we also have, for instance, like the 32, they are connected with the 32 major and 80 minor marks of a Buddha. And she said that then we have like this network of channels, and she went through the different kind of levels of breaking them down. And then it's similar with the winds. And so in general, we have the breakdown of like 21,600 winds in the body. 21,600.
That's this on that long. That they can research. It's a long, 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 sunny, that long, long, jig. Tercerno, tiene sunny resources. Sunny resources de take deva jesi down, then the source can touch with the machine. Jinga Taya, Jinga Taya can less it is.
That's what I'm that's what Pugo Marewa.
To go the who you know.
Go, they took supported some Grava.
Think the net Sanet the long ticket. Deva jesi down. Jinga Tansi the Super Tansi can less it is.
So we have then those 21,600 winds can be subsumed into 5 main, like primary winds. Like there are 5 main winds and then 5 branch winds. And so the 5 main winds, there's first what we refer to as the evacuating winds, or the downward moving winds, the descending winds, which kind of dwell at the secret place. They're what kind of govern the sensation or experience of orgasm, and also like urinating and defecating.
That they were long take a and they do jesse. They were so they were like all.
And this is also the energy that is like one of the winds that is kind of being activated with the practice of tumo and the collection of bliss, this is like the sensation of bliss below the navel when practicing inner fire, inner heat, or tumo. Oh, oh, sorry, we moved on. That's not the evacuating winds. It's the winds, the digestive winds. So the digestive winds, which makes sense because that's connected with fire. That is also what is activated in the tumo, like generates the bliss of and heat of tumo. And this, in a kind of like its ordinary function, is responsible for breaking down and like digesting food. So the digestive heat, the digestive fire.
That long Sonze de long de Karachi, the Ninkati. Ninkati, Sonze de long ticket, in a wong yuma. Woya, the mud, Taya Karachi.
So then there's the life force winds that sort of dwell at the heart center. And those kind of govern the process of breathing. So when we breathe in and out, that's also very much connected with the life force winds. The lung no chiba. The sogzen lung.
Not something.
Any?
Ginger million long, didn't dream about you. Dream about you. Kala Savata, Pomata, Maniata, Dini, Chimama Toyata, not Toyata, Dini, Nagu, Geta Shivata, Game of Led, Sama, Karakas Chihirasina, Driba Hidos.
Then you have the ascending ones, and these dwell at the throat center, and they're what kind of make it possible to eat food, to swallow, to speak, to laugh, to so that is all kind of governed by the ascending ones.
네, 잡지 결론 겨워라래. 되게 솔모신 그대로 솔모. 잡지 결론 겨워라 이때는 솔모 책다. 솔모 책다 라고 책에서 단 이렇게 되는 걸 주세요. 레지레스.
So then we have the pervading winds. So the pervading winds dwell at the crown. And these are what kind of allow the joints to move, which kind of govern movement overall in the body. And so to make it possible for like the joints in our fingers to move, and then the different points that are joints in the body.
And you know, long out, many long. Ne ya nyama do menya ko long yina jevesta yina ke chawa chechi make one thing semme me to se make thoya la tin je ure den te ke me to na shi ne ba ni te ke kare chesin zo thoma le chihres.
So then we have the branch winds. So those are the 5 like main winds. And then there are the 5 branch winds, which are connected with the different organs of the senses. So for instance, in the eyes, there's what's referred to as the Zarma flower in the eye, like in kind of like the very sort of essence of the eye pupil, where there is kind of the shape that's like a flower, and that is where the winds that govern the faculty of sight mainly reside, in the eyeball.
And many long or make something tone. And Swansea yena jo now want the droga kibata that penalty now after the nano chain at the machine at the chain Kajin Sangur, Jit Samaka draw the young class and the drawing with the younger married kid. And now I forgot you with it. Now it comes the Samaka, or I could dry your married. In a call to in another cause it is what they call it, the doctor secret.
So then there's the winds that govern the faculty of hearing reside in this tiny little like pinpoint of a hole in the center of the eardrum, and that's where those winds that enable us to hear sound with the ears, they kind of dwell or reside there. So it's not like the opening of the ear, but like a smaller little pinpoint hole in the inner ear. And then with the tongue, there's like we tend to think that we experience flavors with the whole tongue, but actually there's just like a crescent moon shape along the like edge of the tongue that has like, I mean, maybe that's the case with taste buds. I'm not really sure, but yeah, they're so we could probably call them taste buds, but she said they're like little holes that reside there on the tongue that govern the taste, the faculty or the experience of tasting.
And it has it in a given night wanted more thank you more. Thank you more about the dust. Can not get just why I can let the caressing. Nanola. You go now, she does. You go now, ship your New Year's. Take a just why I can't not take the book at my banana. Just so sick it. You go now, she New Year's. Oh, they're just so sick, it is.
And then for the nose, there are like these 2 tiny little needles that are inside, like in the upper kind of part of the nose, up in the, and that is where the winds that govern the the experience of smelling, the sensation of smelling reside. So again, it's not like we actually smell with our whole nose, but they're just these two tiny little kind of needles, which is where smell resides, the wind of smell. And then on the skin, there's like a very sort of like thin for the sensation of touch or sensation in the body. There's like a film or a thin kind of in between the outer skin and the inner flesh of the body that runs along the whole body. That is what enables us. That's where the wind for sensation dwells. And that's what enables us to, like, based on the clothing that we're wearing, if we feel like a rough sensation or if we like soft sensation, all of that has to do with that wind of sensation that sort of runs along, you know, in between the outer layer of the skin and the flesh, inner flesh. That is where the winds for sensation reside.
Okay, I'm also the some color here the some I'm also get long yeah no tea then Germany ma then tang then the long big budget this such a method it's some long council
Tiniti zinya yorube, zingi yorube.
Zingore.
Zingore.
So jamno mato sembote jena ya kansa togmar. So le tambo pal kale kapo yorete ya ma no ta ya chucho ya. Tinde moto.
So she's now going to share with us a practice for the gentle vase breath. So you may be familiar with the vase breath, but in the beginning, it's better rather than trying to do the vase breath, which involves like holding the breath with a little bit more force. It's better to practice gently. So what we can do is, you know, as we breathe in, we gently breathe in, like, and hold the winds, push the winds down below to reside below the navel, and hold the breath for a little bit. And as you're holding the breath, you can think that all of the channels, the chakras and the channels that branch off become filled with wind. So they're like, you know, it's like taking kind of like a flat collapsed straw and blowing air into it, so they become full with air, with wind. And so we hold it, but just not for too long, not without pushing or, you know, not pushing or anything, but just in this way, and then kind of breathe normally. And then again, you can hold a little bit, but what you're doing is you're pushing that wind to reside below the navel.
Okay.
So now we can practice like this, breathing through the nose in this way and just kind of gently noticing. Don't hold, don't put any force into it. You know, don't push or put any force.
No, yeah, thinking there no study the terms that some Rameshis council something. Get make back the day at that. That in a dodo things here, Maris.
So really relaxed and gentle. You breathe in through the two side channels, the breath goes down, it enters into kind of that nook in the, the kind of like creating like a vase shape below the navel, and you can hold there gently and kind of have this feeling that the wind is filling all of the channels in the body, and just hold it gently for as long as comfortable.
That kind of chasm, you can
So,
no think of it.
so how is it for you? Are you able to hold your breath, or how do you like that?
Question. If you answered it yesterday, just let me know and I'll find the answer in the recordings. But I didn't hear any mention about diaphragmatic breathing versus breathing in, like using your lungs versus your diaphragm. And so it's very different type of taking in the breath. When you use your diaphragm, you're not using your lungs. So I didn't know if there was a distinction in the way.
Yeah, so she hasn't spoken about it like that, but she did say, that you're bringing it all the way down through the side channel. So you're bringing the wind all, but she didn't distinguish, but I'll ask. Dini chitang nato no tangwe kala dini chapar kana nato samotang chapar yore. Samsama loa ne che gyurwa samsama nune dendate o ne che gyure dini di chapar che gyure.
Roll
Yeah, so we're not thinking about like the lungs. We're not doing it with in that way, didn't
Well, it's just a way of you taking the breath, right?
No,
So
Finland,
because the baby doesn't have it.
Yeah. So I think like not thinking, because this is how I'm interpreting what she's saying. Is that you're not thinking of your physical body as you breathe in, you're thinking of the subtle body. So instead of like really being conscious of like whether you're breathing in the lungs or whether you're breathing through the diaphragm, it's more like you're following the sensation of breathing in through the side channels and like bringing that all the way down and then holding the winds below the navel in the vase shape below the navel. So that's like where we're holding, right? But so I think the main thing, she's not like diniti, nupe kala chapar yorebe pena u loa ne tangna yangna dinati so it's like hard to even like translate the concept because dini pena gato samsama chapar yorwa u nupe kala samsama pena te sa ting ringpo madone tindanang shin che yorowa yang na de nune ting ringpo chena dini de toko ne u nupe yorowa chapar yorwe. So she doesn't
long the long in the gods now long the yati
so like actually that concept of breathing from the lungs or breathing from the diaphragm is not something, or breathing from the stomach, like there's not like a term diaphragm, so or maybe there is, but I don't know it. But she said there's not that distinction, like that's not even something she's ever thought of. So mainly it's just like breathing in, because what the main thing that's happening is the visualization. So you're breathing through and then you're like going all the way down and you're holding, like the main focus is on like the collection of the winds below the navel in the vase, like reliquary. That we're kind of like creating this reliquary, this vase like reliquary with the winds in a holding pattern. The winds like bringing up a little bit from below and pushing down from above, and we're holding it there below the navel.
So the reason I ask is in Vedanta, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, it's the diaphragmatic breathing that brings it way down to below your navel.
I see.
That is the technique you use that brings them.
I don't think that's
Tibetan system. It's not part of it.
I don't think so. Japargi Lula, Gayansana Japargi Yoga Dawa Yorwa, Teni Kongso Yang no do Nuni Mar Tinda Tewagi Ola Leyaki Chidu, the Pena Loa ne Utanya Yomari Tobo ne Utanya Yore, the Nune de Tobo ne Tinda Lingua at all. Tindala Kare Yinian Chichen and Bubeki Luxo Yomari.
Togo Kandit
So can you explain like how she is like, how do you breathe from your stomach? What do you mean?
You don't even feel any window.
So she thinks she's getting it. Oh, is that a Indian word? She's saying some Indian, she's saying something you do in pranayama. So that's different. Okay, that's what she's saying. Yeah. So it's totally different from the Indian yogas. Yeah, because she was saying in the Indian yogas, you're not like what we have to realize is this is so primarily rooted in the visualization. And so you're really like focusing on the visualization of like the breathing in through the side channels and then bringing the winds down to rest below the navel. And this is mostly happening with the mind, with the visualization, more than manipulating like the body and the breath. So this So in this word that she's saying that I don't know, you know, Kapalabhati, and which she's obviously studied a little bit because she did yoga training in Rishikesh. She did like an Indian yoga training, and so she learned this, and she said the difference is like what we're doing here is really, like she said before, it's really having to do with the mind. Like we're primarily creating, what the point of it is to still and rest the mind. But in Kapalabhati, it is mainly health related. So it is, the focus is more physical.
Not what I'm asking about. It's not what Amadea is talking about. So the way that I was trained is that you absolutely have to do, even for meditation, you have to do diaphragmatic breathing.
Okay, yeah, so that's different. So she doesn't probably have, she
the way that you focus on, like you, it's just the way you bring in the
breath
to your, it's through your diaphragm, and that enhances the meditation practice then.
She probably doesn't have familiarity with that system, but she does have familiarity with the one that Amadea is speaking about. So that's the difference that she's talking about. But dini morang yang chichina chakargi lukso kaka che cherang matso che panang shin sim neya ki tapshida che yura ini yang kung so ki yang di trobo ki u lindu di nine u mar doya ki chidu dini trobo ni che go yore mato pena u yang nu ne yo che yo mare di trobo yang mar ne yura di nune o kewa ola ya ki chidu dina che go yore. So where does that come from?
Kundalini Vidya. It's Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya from the 8th century. Advaita Vedanta.
Yang de Jakar di Lukche Tenda Che Giore. She said, well, there is. So there is kind of like maybe, you know, like for instance, in practicing the vase breath, there is manipulation like in the abdomen and in the diaphragm or stomach, like moving, you know, to push it down.
It's about making it subtle.
yoris.
So there's wind there, but you're not actually even breathing in. You're pushing the wind down below the navel without even breathing
It's about
in this
more
one.
with more subtle and subtle breath and use your diaphragm.
The niti yang the tawo the yang penamar ninya ki tapshu dawo yasare. Yeah, that's probably the case. She's not familiar with it.
So it's just a difference in
So what she is seeing from like what she has familiarity with in terms of the Indian systems is that it's mostly connected with health, like health related. So that
This one's not. It's
yeah.
working Kundalini. It's working
They
with
cut that
Shakti,
in,
Kundalini.
Kundalini.
It's very subtle. So when we get home, I can show.
Ini jela tingere.
Okay.
Okay.
Kaisina jaga yoga ngashilari. Kaisina Tsa Lung deni shadi nimo chaya.
So like for instance, like really creating from what she's trained in, there's like flexibility in the body and
That's hatha yoga, right?
Yeah, she did
So
hatha
this is
yoga.
Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and it's a Kundalini Vidya, so it's working with subtle systems. It's not about health.
Dene kakache, di nune simge yang dota rawoche, right? Kakache.
Tata mucho yoga tata de karesna mucho kerla dea de chama long sa ni ma zen naro chiro ke Tsa Lung ke yoga je trago na tene sa ni tram je yomaris long de ma zen na pen long de pen je ma zen na pen mucho polo jagra polo anti polo jagra polo de la Nama family Sara jana na far pergamare payu rumara ni na chege no tote long term jinde zone dalong ke chukar jate tem jinde min ni mo to zobo de chola dores.
So the vase breath in the 6 yogas is really crucial to the other kind of practices of the 6 yogas and the different exercises like trukor and things like that, because you have to feel like there has to be the wind. It's like a ball. She said, like you have to inflate a ball, fill it with air if you want to bounce the ball, for the ball to bounce. So similar with some of these 6 yoga exercises, without practicing the vase breath, there's no way to like continue on to move forward with the other practices.
And then also yoga de garde sem de ya to sem tam me kwani te gores.
And again, the focus or the point with these yogas is the unification of wind and mind. So the mind and wind becoming unified. And so it's very tied to concentration. If the mind becomes distracted, then that's it, you lose the wind. And then it can be dangerous, like with the trokor practices. If you become distracted and then you lose the wind, and then you do the exercises like the trokor exercises, you can break your legs or your hips. So I mean, you can actually there can be severe injury.
What is that?
Trokor, yeah, trokor.
What is it?
It's like when they fly up.
Tsa Lung.
There are like these, there are these, there are these yogic exercises for the practice of Tummo that involve like a lot of, they're very secret practices, but yeah. They're very profound. Yeah.
Not this body.
Huh?
That's another system.
Is it an exercise similar to for it was developed by Tamagoji Rinpoche? It was
Yeah, there's lots of different.
Someone Yuri Tunkor.
True core from what we've been presented is very physical and
Yes.
very demanding physically,
Yeah.
and that's why it can be very dangerous.
Yes, it's very difficult, she said. And that's one of the things about, secret mantra, like, when we talk about like the highest kind of, secret practices, and part of it is that makes, it's this difficulty because they're not easy, really difficult, demanding practices.
Long time Jordan, Herman, Pinjati, Sunday, Narajuran Tandem, Conquer Lang, Lamade, not control answer, not control answer. And then, near good control answer, my pan to Gajan. How long sem she mara? Did there. Did the shoes on? Shooting Barida. Current long sem that did Naruto long sem this. Under the jig is a shock temper shoes, human summer. Under the shoes. Lampan, so more, Jirin.
Wow. Wow.
It's take time, but trying not control. So much. Shouldn't be so beyond. Can't do that.
This is
Master, not been young. Not don't shoes on it. Not been young, got you down. Then Daniel to the device. So did it. So congratulations, Jason. Not can just see more giants. You can see Naranki Moranda, and the dog take the town. Young guys in the con, long sim, and the thought fair. Garrison. Didn't the check on your mother. Long mazam to the little tissue, Lamsa, Saya the cheek, in Nagri.
So, So she actually got into a fight with one of her relatives like some time ago, and he had trained in the yogas, so he could hold the winds, and she hadn't done retreat yet, and she couldn't hold the winds, and they were kind of like they were physically like fighting with each other, and he sort of slapped her on her arm. But he didn't, not even that hard. It was just kind of like a very light slap. But because of the power of his practice, like in the winds that he could like send through his body, there was a print like of his fingers on her arm that like became swollen, like swelled up in the shape of his fingers. And then she was really mad, and she was like trying to like pinch his skin, and she couldn't because his skin was like so hard, it was like a rock. So she was like trying every which way to like pinch his skin, and she couldn't because it was just like so solid and that was because of his practice with the winds. And so she was telling somebody else about it, and they kind of like explained, what that was, why. Yeah, so it was before she'd like been to India. She was in Tibet at that time. She was young.
Long stomach
So with these true core practices, which it involves these things called BEPs, which are where you like rock and then like fly up into the air and then land. And she said, you know, and it's totally governed by this base breath and wind ability to work with the winds. And so if you're holding the winds or if you have control over the winds, you can fly up really high. And when you land, it's just like a bounce, like a kind of like cushioned bounce. There's no weight to it. And so there's not, whereas you can't, as she mentioned, if you lose the concentration, you lose the wind, and then you do one of these reps and land, you can break a bone, or like people, you know, can be, you know, for like 2 weeks, you know, you're in pain, you can't move, you know, or you can't do the exercises. So there's really this very big difference in connection with how you're holding or not holding the winds, or how to what degree you have control over the winds.
That's like Virginia, that's like, I don't know if you've ever read any Alexandra David-Neal books.
Oh,
And she talks about how, this is going back 150 years, the lamas used to, like, they used to be able to cover such long distances in such a short period of time because they can almost fly.
So that's, I think, what she was talking about before, the swift-footedness that she mentioned, the city of swift-footedness. Lama kongso beta rinpo dutu tungtung nanga dotu ba. Yeah, that's definitely, yeah. And she said, you know, at that time there were so many yogis practicing in retreat, and a lot of Drupon Palkyi yogis too. Like, so, you know, it is said that, you know, in the old days, like during the time of Jigten Surin, for instance, like the whole like valleys were filled with Drupon Palkyi yogis, and the mountainsides were filled with Drupon Palkyi yogis. So there were like, and people were really doing these esoteric practices, like in a very widespread way all over Tibet in the past.
And I was told that's how Guru Rinpoche got from India to Tibet. He flew.
Tini yang Guru Rinpoche Pacha Chakar ne Guru la lepe Chetan Pacha Namkala Puri Jure, and then probably, yeah.
My Indian master told me that.
Chakar very quite possible.
Because it's imaginary. It's not physical. You're breathing physically and you have your rhythm, but it's the rhythm that's married to the you're imagining yourself holding the breath and then fanning the flame and letting go. So it's only related to the rhythm, not the actual physical breathing in, breathing out. Is that right?
How do I say? So, okay. Dini tinda pena yang matu mikpachi yurwa. Dini dini yang di pena nu pekala tumo kikola laki sarwa. Dini di yang tesa pelya ki chindu nu yore la yurwa. Ini yang ini chini ram nu bagi nu tam begi nu pa mayempa. So the garela bokare de pena mar ki mikpa do yena. So Mari, so you're talking about the fanning, like the fanning, yeah, then the pena yang the me the parya the nupa do, so mikpa the nune lung ram yojumare.
long term make
It's both. It's the visualization and the wind. So it's like the mind, the visualization, which is kind of like the rhythm I think that you're speaking to, and the actual wind. Yeah. But obviously, I mean, the breath is not going all the way down. Yeah.
And it's in the lungs, it's not in the.
Right, but they're not making that distinction because they are thinking of it going all the way there. That's, yeah.
that long
Tsa
term
Lung nuni mar do marawati loa
long
No,
term
no, but they are going down. They're
that is under
yeah.
long term
Mhm.
Tata Mera she could the Saya the Martis on the Kaya the Dendri. That long distance and then this on the second
So for instance, it's like what she was saying, like it's hard for us to have that concept because we're so tied to like what we're considering to be biological like reality. But the wind, the movement of the wind is subtle body related. So when she tells the story about her cousin like slapping her and leaving that mark, right? And for instance, that's the wind going through his hands, right? And so like, and when you do the beps or when you're doing the trukor, and if you're holding the wind, you become buoyant, you become like a bouncing ball. There's not, whereas if you don't have that, then you can break your legs. So that shows that there is actually a physical reality to the movement of the wind. So we have to move beyond thinking that the winds, that our breath is only in our lungs, that there is wind that's going all the way down and entering there. So there is actually that experience of that.
Jinda chocolate the pie young Nima the Vinilla, but didn't put the Purpasra. And the company temple learning. Then the company it, the Antori, and again, Alkins out of the temple, the report of course. I took a la Tanka, Taya down, that your Taya down, no put the Tabora Pukaka. It is Naka Tabo, company temple, the report of the teaching. And again, Genza Hakoya, Yak Genza temple. Kosani Kornless, not the Korani and just the Machachi Korgoda Genzani, Mata Puran Genda, Nanzumo Tibatiers, Genza Batia Genza Bata. Ah, Kambachibora, Korani Geta Pagateta Mamora, Jan Gold, not bad, it's a jam far. Then it take time, a jab chaya. The lip, something got taken. Gajamia, make your time goes on. Gajamia, not get up on person like Gajan, should go home the mamma, come back yet. And that got a chance chatted. Long your 40 cents, the little tea here. Something got to do. Jab jab. Zog had that. When she mother the person. Ang long sem tade. Den long sem perder. Ko sim yo jama ko chama so. Didn't pate yor. Ate mate ara long masan santina ko yang simo yang de cha. Isemo de yo jam chakang le mutanga. Pe na so long sem long. Long sem perder.
Finissimo Baritoso?
Io chiamato Roland
Tola Domas.
Romas.
Tiniti
Ne bayar.
Tiniti Gaparde Gadire.
Di kaden himdo de noto roji pratika noto kamba chimbo chilla kore nota kar.
Oh, Munich. Okay. So she also.
Didn't pate yore.
So she said one thing she'll share with you guys in her own experience is that so one time when Garchen Rinpoche was coming to Munich and they had to rent like a big space for him to come, and they were kind of like working on like they had these metal ladders that they were, you know, using for being able to you know, hang the tangas and such. And so there were these two guys that were working with her, and there was a lot going on, it sounds like. And so they went up these metal ladders to maybe like a loft area and were in there. And when they got on the ladder, and then something happened where she was holding the ladder, and then her finger got like squished between the metal and the ladder. It was incredibly painful, like almost like totally flattened her finger. And she was yelling at them, but they couldn't hear her because they were far away, and there was like so much happening. She was like crying. It was so painful. And then she was like, okay, whatever happens, and she just started like meditating on the winds and like holding holding her breath and holding the winds, and then like manipulating the winds in her finger, you know. And then she was like, okay, and she just, as she was meditating, she pulled her finger out, and like had she not been, you know, even her nail wasn't even damaged. Whereas, you know, for sure, she's certain, had she not done that, she would have broken her finger, and definitely like it would have been, but it was fine. And that is, she attributes to because of being able to meditate on the winds and in that way.
There's a question online about on exhale, the next breath, what's happening with the exhale? Do we keep the winds in the base?
Tini the lung bombachian jamung chewe kala. Tini the nu gyurawa tini thang do tini kari chegyure ta lung the lumba nanga zingyure kande lung kari chegyure.
the Jinka Yomar, don't watch our door.
Yeah, so you're not still holding them when you exhale, because, you know, like when you exhale, you
I just don't
exhale.
think that's a fine.
So it's,
long matter consona, urine for dagon consona matter. This matter, yeah, Jeva. That's a fine. Color, not my own, and oh, yeah. Long to choose it. Into matter, the young mother. The young mom matter. We told the yeah, what you comes, then the caressona. Nimachilla, Suko Yapona, long the Karcha Yachers and Grace. Second,
okay.
then that Nasa think Mandawana, Suko Yapo Minatini, Kama Jonga, Nishodo, Sunchadore. Yina is let on Popatan, and Botan, Yan Mapo Bomsona, Mama.
So Karcha Jachu,
Second,
yeah, didn't got you like here?
Supo Yapuyo, Mipa Yapo Sensona, Nimachilla line, but the Carson, long days are in Tonsen Tabares.
Then it karma chuma sumchu gadu.
I let on Bopa the Master in Jumera. He did always.
But karma chuma sumchu karcha jachu le mangarwa.
Karcha, Karma line, but Karcha.
Oh, karcha tumtum.
Karcha, second,
Wait, then he
second
jachu.
Jacho.
Yeah.
Supo Yapona, second Jacho. Maria, Supo Yapo, second.
Oh, second. Okay, karcha. Yeah.
Not just this, John and
Confused. Okay. So she said, you know, so what, you know, she has experience herself, you know, knowing like that it starts off like you can't hold for very long, you know, so you breathe in, you like hold the breath, and then you when you need to breathe out, you breathe out, and then you breathe in again. So you're basically training yourself to hold for like longer and longer periods. And so if you know you're in good shape and you have good concentration, And after you train for a little while, you can hold the breath for like 80 seconds at a time. And so those who have maybe are not as in good shape, and their concentration is not so strong, then maybe it's like 15 to 30 seconds.
So exhaling, we don't need to pay attention to the exhale.
Yeah.
Keep it out of our mind.
Yes, right. The exhale, nothing, yeah, there's just, she said, yeah, so there's no like particular visualization or anything with the exhale. Yeah. So it's basically you hold it until you can't. Mhm. Oh, and you don't want to fart. She said, because if you're holding, like if you're like holding the wind and you're like building it up, and like if you release, like for instance, if you breathe out and then you're breathing in and you're like building the ability to hold, and it's like holding there and the vase, and then if you fart, it all just like goes away. Yeah. So you're holding up from below. You're creating, the reason why it's called the vase breath is you're creating a vase. Like if you look at the bulbous part of the vase on the shrine, that's kind of the shape in which we're holding the winds below the navel. And so we're pulling up a little bit from beneath, what do we call that? The perineum. Pulling up a little bit and creating like a sort of, like a bottom of the bottom of the vase, and then we're pushing down from above and creating the top, and we're kind of creating like a reliquary, like a spherical reliquary there in which to hold the winds.
Yoga naro, yoga chaguna, that
and so what we're doing when we practice the winds with the 6 yogas, like we're gaining the ability to send the wind intentionally through like all of the channels of the body. And they become like filled, they become kind of blown up like a balloon, all of the channels. And that's how we're training, with these exercises. Wrong, zupo.
Long sem, Mipaya Pocha,
Did not young not toa.
Dine.
So like if for instance you have if you're holding your winds and you have like really good concentration and your mind and your winds are united, and if you like, I'm a little bit unclear if she's talking about like this height or like a higher height, but like if you fall off, and like hit a stone, there's like you won't hurt your body at all. But if you fall and you're not holding your winds, then you'll be injured. And like people break their legs, or but with this ability to practice with the winds, then you can like fall from a high height and not experience any problem, like not harm your body at all.
지랑 그 강야 연구 말이 난 나고요.
Mudradana.
뭐라다나 지하요래. 뭐라다 아우. 나는 요 말아. 아 핀톤 요 말아. 넌 꼭 가와 잡선데 되게 털는 거 차트 그 말아.
So she says like even with
That's so level 요 말이 맛이.
okay.
오케이. 예. 제 주소 좀 바꿔 센서.
So should we take a break? Yeah.
네, 저는 좋았다 노티스.
So then we can have some question and answer afterwards.
A few harsh feelings.
Bedu sado samaya mane palaya bedu sado tenoba tisha gera me baba sutta kaya me baba sutta kaya me baba anaraja me baba sarva siddhi nikaya sasara kama sutta me sutta shriya kriyo aha aha ho bhagavan sarva tata gata bhajan mami sarve bhama Naka Barsen tipo tang yang tong rulu jeda. Je vais pas une tang de
So you know, yeah, like having taken a break and relaxed a little bit. So now, whatever, you know, if you have some questions, it's you know, we can have just some time to clear up any questions you might have.
I have a question. Drupon mentioned earlier in the teaching, the purpose of these exercises is to unite the wind and the mind until they attain union. Is that for the purpose of realizing the true nature of reality and the mind?
Diniti long sem de nyamne chetang de yune long sem nyamdu zomya yer me bado chaya ki mingyo yore sumimba chana sumsonga dini dinda yang chaya ki jimsen tena sim gi ngo thongya ki jimsen rebe. Yes.
Semta me kani take the gen ani long sem year me sinya terdeni ta karesa dedi teacher chasna moto 사자 진보 뭐 또야 조카 진보 뭐 세모 추송 라야 돼서 세만에 추를 가르쳐버렸어.
So yeah, exactly. By uniting the winds and mind, then this makes it easier, and mainly also because of the building of concentration, it makes it easier to realize Mahamudra, to realize Dzogchen. Without gaining that kind of concentration and control, then it's impossible to realize the true nature of mind.
Just clarification on the path of the winds, when you take them in, do they go up and around the back of the ears?
Dini di pena long no pekala dini di yeyo nine yardo dini lebale koragya dini mardo yere.
진짜로 가르라고 그랬다. 되네 야로 되네.
So she's doing the reverse motion and she's showing us. So it goes like from the, you know, they go up parallel to the central channel. It's just exactly like it's depicted here. Yini ang di amcho the mardo yere. But amcho the gyala or dunla.
무조건 남주 제대 가서 되네 짜대요라. 짜대 되네 파트나 지마 성과. 되네 약학도.
So no, it doesn't go behind the ears because like I think that there was kind of a description earlier that seemed a little bit different, but if you think about it, like like you have the 3 channels inside the body. So you're just, you're not visualizing, you're just visualizing them going up and then down to the nostrils.
So don't even really get too hung up on physicality.
Yeah, I think
Kare
that's right.
dulasa.
Pena tini yang de pena zupo rang samlo matang ne pena amcho la soba shida samlo matang ne tini yang pena tongba yin banam shin zupo tongba yin.
Le ringo so kanshina tata so te le jang tsa jang tengle jang de suso la mipa de yupa de la yupa de ngunzi mari mipa de la yupa de sohe mari yupa la yupa ngunzi ji ten suso la zopo ke ta nyame ji de nipa ji ke tengle da nipa ji ke tsa da nipa ji ke kare kolo de so shihe yore mato mi yon je den kolo tang mi ba tile tang mi ba sa chin tang mi ba yore ta mo so ke ta nyamne je ka ta mi ba ji ke sa jo sem ke de ne le la kare se mi ba ji ji sa mi ba ji ke tile mi ba ji ke long de de ne de ma do she de yore.
Yeah, that's right. Don't get too so like you're thinking of the body itself being hollow apart from these channels and chakras and winds, because what we're used to, like actually kind of fabricating a reality that doesn't really exist. And so to overcome that, we're trying to realize like the intrinsic nature, the essence that is what actually is, which is like this subtle body. And so there are like actually countless channels, countless variations of winds, countless sort of like, the drops are also countless in number. And then we're kind of subsuming those into these just like primary sort of like the most kind of powerful consolidation of that system being like, the 3 channels and the 4 chakras. And so we're working with those, and that's where our focus is, but we're not really trying, like that is all we're visualizing.
Try to break the attachment really to
And it yes, exactly.
Kanshi tama baka ziba de shi la mo to tata je de le byong tan gom ja de ya de la gom de tama baka ziba shi ya de kare je ton la je gom la so me sa gom na ton la je gom la ma do ta de je yu ba je cha yu ba je ne kare sa na rugo yu ba sha yu ba je gom la yu ma ne on la je ja u kran shi je sa ina ja u kran shi
Yes. Yeah, so we're not identifying with like the coarse body of delusion. We're identifying with the pure, like empty kind of light-like form of the subtle body, which is, like we're not thinking of ourselves as being a body of flesh and blood. We're visualizing the outside of our body being the enlightened form of the deity, which is like rainbow light, and it's empty, and inside is hollow except for this rainbow-like light-like network of channels and chakras. And so that is what we're focusing on. We're not thinking of ourselves in our ordinary form.
So with the when you're doing the base breath and you're holding the winds, say you stop the practice, or even when you exhale, do the winds dissipate on their own? How does that happen? And what happens with
the bomba chin the zembe kava tini yang the zen tini bomba nama yorwa tini thang do tini bomba nama the long the gare chabi mepa do
long the patch long over.
Yeah, so the wind is going out when you
Oh,
exhale.
so when you exhale, the winds actually do go with your breath.
Yeah.
So they follow your breath.
Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, then it yang jesu dong yeah.
You're only holding your pause.
As you're holding it, as you're holding your breath.
Yeah, you're creating the pause, and then when you exhale, the pause is gone.
Dini di bumba meba chavire tongdu. So yeah, you don't have to think of it as being like an object, like a vase that's an object. It's just the shape that we're holding the winds in. La? So we have like it's just the name is the vase, like the vase that we're kind of holding the breath in the shape. And that's kind of a natural residing for the winds there below the navel, but there's no like reliquary, there's no like spirit holding. Yeah.
It's just your mind.
It's just what
holding.
it's
Yeah.
resembling
Yeah.
energetically.
Yeah.
Tene 가르친 진바 시에서만 tene 소소 시급값을 tene tukdani 요야 그게 신호라 신호데 이제 신도 dentro classe di lama dentro recently the so chama tene que ngola tene che careso zokola na salpa tunziba dande de me shende lai mo sanam tosde tene ko shu kausara tene manjia ta zokya ta yo mares tene tatala bomdea chama.
So she said, you know, there are those examples of like masters who die in what's called tukdam, where they're sitting, you know, in the meditation posture. And then there are those who actually like the bodies and they stay there, you know, for like a week, you know, long time after they died. And there are some who, you know, their bodies produce like relics or what we call ring cell, these little like spheres of relics. And so she said that is because they have broken through ordinary, like attachment to the body is ordinary, and they are identifying with the enlightened form of the deity. So they have like totally transformed their body so that they aren't identified with like ordinary the physical kind of ordinary grasping of the physical body, and instead they have really realized their themselves as the enlightened form of the deity.
gengo cha shindo rochi vikasal teni make one quote against Chidama teni ka kom de chode da chade any chora tando leres the in zobo the suso ha ko martin the batam so teni chade sar tando leres any ko long tando leres the teni Lord Chendi da Garrison Town, Joa Dudons. In the time, she got the catches on the family, the dedication of yours. They do, Durham Martyr, the church of Tadaya.
So when we practice the generation stage, we are purifying the karmic imprint for birth. And when we practice the dissolution, the completion stage, we're purifying the karmic imprint for death. So as we get older and our bodies deteriorate, we're moving towards like a dissolution. And then when we die, there's this process of like the body dissolving into the different elements, like, you know, the mouth becomes dry. And at that point, like it's because there's the dissolution of the water element is dissolving. Or like then the body you can't move the limbs anymore because the flesh of the body is dissolving into earth. The earth and the earth element is dissolving. And the wind then dissolves, like the breath dissolves into wind. That's like the wind element, the dissolution in the wind element, and And so we at the time of death, we experience this process of dissolution where each of the elements, the body is dissolving in connection with each of the elements. And then we no longer, like, that is the breakdown of the physical body. And so when we practice the dissolution of the deity, the enlightened form of the deity, when we're practicing, we're breaking down the generation stage, that sort of counteracts that breakdown of the physical body. And so it's a purification of the death process, the dissolution at the time of death. So somebody said it looked like someone had a question. Is it you?
Yeah, I had a couple. Going back to the breath practices, when we're doing the subtle space breath, and we're working with these breathing practices, they've gone over many different types of breaths and winds. So all of those winds were basically impacted or infected. So that's
By what?
by doing these practices, the breathing practices.
Oh, okay.
It's because we're specifically working with concentration on the winds, right? Subtly. And then is there, I guess we're able to impact and enhance all of the winds. Like, we talked about digestive winds, we talked about sensory winds, we've gone over quite a few. So just kind of getting a bigger picture on that. And then, are there any particular instructions for working specifically with the sensory winds? From gross to subtle, perhaps, or the five senses. Is there any kind of metaphors, from fire to wind, wherever it might be?
Dini chi long gamanda yore sum yorwa kana ni chi tong ja dini yang ti duni dini nga yorwa dini ti sum nga di kola la yin dini yang ti wang po nga di long ga wo sum yorwa dini ti so sama kana nga so long ni nam ni ti re kala di so di long sama la rawa yorwe dini di yang mai
Chutanga draw your yin yang tata nyamni chevasura then that's all go maris.
So she said there's a connection.
Sama churdu that salan, sama churdu, Tilenan sama churdu, then it didn't never yuba, nyamni didn't never yuba that Betu.
So, right, she enumerated, like the 21,600 different types of winds, and then the 5, and then the 2 sets of 5s, the main and the branch, and she said, so there's a connection with all of them, but what you're doing is then you're subsuming, right? And so what it really is like, primarily like taking those main winds that have like power, and kind of consolidating the power and then working with those. So she said, we don't have to think about it like that. We don't have to think about like the specific different winds of the body as we're doing these practices. There is a connection, but you don't have to like think about it.
So is there any other, I get that, but is there also anything like in terms of working with the sense?
Like to give the senses power or something? Is
Yeah,
that what you're
make it
like
one
frighten them? No.
I'm not looking to gain anything, but just.
Just
So can let and take it. Have your and make music is sermon method of the I'm a church music at the sang Moshe Tower. There, like this France of let and let's get it and then mother.
Yeah, so this isn't no, there's like no particular like practice it's just to sort of explain how the winds function in the ordinary body, that there's like this flower in the eye where the winds of the eye faculty reside, and there are these needles in the nose where the winds of the, but there's not in terms of practicing with the winds, there's not Yeah, there's not a connection there explicitly or specifically.
And I was just curious, I looked at the census a lot, just expressions and what people kind of look for. Transforming, you know, advocates by actually having some sensory experience and ability to express rather than withhold. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mo sometimes la pena wangbo the nishamba la yang wangbo the nupa la tini yang pena zubo draya la sopa the mixer jawa yang chia in mupa do yore.
Rintate lat amche do na ayo vidando di sa kare na sai na tera sam shi goya me ke wang po ke kare ne pa ye shi goya ke chimbo
So
na so de na de suzo ke nyane inza de me pa de sen ni che de chen de so chang re ke de sam na tan do na de
So it's different in the context of healing, right? So like in medicine or Ayurveda, you know, it makes sense that you would be focused on like, especially with the health of the faculties and things like that, you know, like specifics regarding, you know, the winds of each of the faculties. But in this context, which is the practice context, which is really about bringing, as she said, like unifying the winds in mind and building concentration. If we're thinking about all of these different details, it actually creates more distraction than it does concentration. So that's why we just kind of don't go there. It's simplified. Mm-hmm.
Being practical and talking about practice. So we're practicing the Tumo, what she has taught us. So would we do that in conjunction with like Vajrayogini Sadhana for generation and completion stage? So we're uniting the preparatory practices of the winds and the mind with the generation and completion stage, just Vajrayogini, whatever deity people you're focusing.
So I didn't get the question, I'm sorry.
We're talking about these practices, and then she talks about generation stage and completion stage. How is it all brought together in a practice?
Okay. Dini chi chirim da zorim gi korla la yorwa. Dini chitang tena dorji na dorma komia yore. Dini di nyamli di to kena di chirim da nyamli chigi yorebe kena ngato yang dorji na dorma chebe. Dini yang drupta che yang donju yorebe kande che
dorjinam jama
Mare tata de dorje na dormadang nyamle de la dawa kare yore e kana chiram dang nyamle che yore ve tene drupta mixa che donju yore ve
chetang ke yore cheta de dorjinam jama la pecha ringpon do gosan do je thungpon do gosan de de zoram yore
yeah the kakare tena lung ba chen dang Tsa Lung dang kakare
ati da karesina naro chudo nane ma nyamne che de kakala na kare la ta dorje pamo ke pecha na long the Tsa Lung Tsa da long ti le de chama yore la gra ati di kon zoko tona de dorje nam je ba che pecha te chudo na yore naro chudo
So what it is, so this is maybe gonna clarify. So we say Vajrayogini is the deity for these 6 yoga practices, but they're kind of practiced separately. So like at first you focus on the generation stage where you're visualizing yourself as Vajrayogini, and you do that as a generation stage practice. And there are sadhanas. There are all different sorts of sadhanas. There are very extensive sadhanas, and there are more abbreviated sadhanas. And so but you practice for a time, you know, doing the generation stage of Vajrayogini, and then that becomes very stable. Then you move into the practice of the 6 yogas, which has its own text but it's not, and the body is Vajrayogini externally, but it's not like a combination of the generation stage with the 6 yogas like in the sadhana, if that makes sense. They're separate.
So within the 6 yogas, the days Vajrayogini and you're practicing the completion stage?
Tini di pena naro chudro na tini di sin shegi zobre min sare yena yang zupo dorje na dormarang. Yes. It's completion stage with characteristics. That's the channels, winds, and drops. Yeah.
I have Vajrayogini initiation, but I don't have 6, yogas of world initiation.
Tini di wang do yorebe di naro chudro pena dorje na dorma wang yore yena yang chudro di wang do yomare.
Ngadi gawang nangari tini
Di torwang.
ngadi ke toran nangari ini karesa tara chudong nani tini Tsa Lung tile tisa ma chigiri long chigiri ini Vajra yogini sada nalogari tini nipa mambo sagori yami mambo chegori.
So, there's a progression, right? First of all, for the empowerment, there's not like 6 yoga empowerment, but it is part of which you've probably received, the Torma empowerment of the 5-fold path of Mahamudra, like that's in there. But then there's the progression, right? So you do have to get like all of the teachings, the transmissions, and you have to do a very large amount of Vajrayogini accumulations, for instance, before moving to the 6 yogas. So there's like the progressive, progressive stages that lead to practicing the 6 yogas.
Yeah, I completed the conscious retreat for that.
Mo tenda sama saksariyade. That's great.
Thank you. So who would I go to next to get
Tini
the?
di naro chudu
Six
gong
yogas.
una tini su gogre.
Naro chudong gong
Well, you're
gong
getting some instructions right now. But she said, but you can ask anyone who has, who has done the course of practices. It's important to get it from someone who's done the 3-year retreat. Who's done the 3-year retreat, who's done them in retreat.
Like maybe Drupon Vincent Georgia.
Yeah.
But then, you can't very well ask someone who hasn't done the retreat, they won't really, they won't have experience to be, like, they won't have a basis for being able to really teach.
For these practices, there's like 2 aspects. One is that you do these accumulations of numbers, but there's another aspect which are signs of progress. Now, I took on the comment on that. As they come, they come up as we get accomplishment.
Tini de pena yang nyamling chedu pena Georgina Dorma Danka sa pogre la sopa. Yene yang Danka sadne mayimba de ta yang yorowa ta tingo gre la gre sa sa. Tini pena ta gare yore. Tini de yang de tesa pena ta lebne mato tinta cheju mepa na shinube gande de. Yeah, you do have to have signs of accomplishment. And without practice, it will be difficult to have to experience any signs. And so like we've been sort of just dipping our toes into this, getting some instruction for like 3 days, and so, to expect to have any sign of accomplishment or practice after a little bit of experience it's very unrealistic. So it really takes a lot of dedication to these practices to show signs of accomplishment. Apart from those who, you know, there are like what they refer to as instantaneous realizers who have like a lot of practice from former lives, you know, where they've done like a lot of practice in former lives and they're already have done a lot of purification, like they purified a lot and gathered a lot of merit. And so it might be that it just takes like a small thing for them to suddenly have this huge breakthrough. So sometimes that happens, but it's very unusual. Most of the time it really takes a very kind of long period of dedicated practice, usually in like isolation, you know, or in a really kind of concentrated situation of retreat practice to develop some of these signs.
Marana da tipa chere na karen shinga so san de ka sa so much to so yere da je gorde
Wait, got it?
yedam nyamne jina
Uh-huh.
ha sa ha gomna
Mm-hmm.
na so san de ka sa da je gorde
Mm-hmm.
san yedam chi bola.
Yeah. So she said she herself has a lot of obscurations, and when she was in retreat, you know, there were about 16 people, they were in retreat practicing together, and they did very intensively, like day and night, you know, accumulation and practice of the Yidam deity for like 8 to 9 months. So like 8 to 9 months of intensive practice, you know, every day, all day, not talking, not doing other things. You can't go outside. You can't talk to anyone. You don't have a phone. So they would wake up at 2 in the morning. And later, if you're like, you know, sleep in, you wake up at 3. So actually, and during Tumo, when you get to the 6 yogas and you're practicing Tumo, clear light, dream yoga, you actually don't sleep. You just meditate through the night. And if you do sleep, it's just like that. You're, you know, sitting up in the meditation posture. It's really, really nice. It's very pleasant. Actually. At first, it's really hard. And then you like sort of at first you keep dozing off, and you like she showed, but then you kind of get the hang of it. And sometimes when you doze off like that, you have the feeling like you just like toppled over from a high cliff. But you have like your white shawl and your meditation belt, and you sit in the posture of the, like she was just showing, with your knees up, and it's really nice.
So this is after you do all of your preliminary practices?
Ini munro machini di jela sare. So chitang di yang munro jela yung di sare. Yeah, it's like in the progressive. So in their 3 years, they start, you know, with the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, which is the beginning of the preliminaries. So, and actually you have to do it twice. So you have to do Mundro twice, not, but she herself, I think, said she did it like 4, 5 or 6 times. Yeah, she did it 5 times. Mundro. But in retreat, she did it twice. They had to do it twice. They had to do 2 sets of Mundro. Yeah. No, I think in retreat. The some
Right, you know,
yeah.
to qualify for retreat, you don't have to complete the preliminary. You do 2 sets of them in the.
Then it some go to suit me, then it ting money Mundro chegi or what? Yes, right.
Yes.
It namju chama mangyadori.
And that's like the foundation, you know. Yeah, so preliminaries definitely first.
That why you
So do you have, any
I
other
mean, the man wrote
questions? Any other?
Just when Drupon said that, like with the advanced physical practices, if you get distracted, you lose the wind.
Mhm.
I find that very interesting. It seems like a teaching on concentration in general. Like anything you're trying to accomplish, there's a role of the winds in that. Like if I'm checking if I'm understanding. Like the winds get dispersed when the concentration gets dispersed.
Ini pache something namun lape jawa chumbo yujire. Guys in a chiki, guys see penasim yinna, then long short gire. Ini denda yina penati denda gare yina yang di chitin yina yang chu yina da. The lega druya ki chidu di long dang nyam du penasim se chipala ne tu bagi jawa chumbo yure. Ini yang long yoba la yang di druk tu kiona mena jawa chumbo yujire. Yeah, you're right.
Tsa Lung Tibetan Yoga of Chama La Gomde, so Chama Zimbashi Yadam, Nikarasna, Sem Yaponeta. Any Koran Lasanta, Leka led Semte Tinena, Nesuna, any can not treasure Yongomari. Penna. Kalanda zoteta gun semya putin ne de tak kalat se ka se chichong ka se ta putin de tab ne ya ko ne sun la pa chicken ba ga mar ka jong man jong san de san ta ni la pa chi ba ya ta simo ta bya ta de yo ko no che che bo moda tang na ta do moda tang de gom ni do moda tang de sem de yin take down the thing, moda donka jaya ta lam certain city control sama you got it.
So yeah, absolutely. There is a very strong connection between the wind and the mind and concentration. And so like everything, like what we're doing here, you know, is we're purifying the channels, purifying the winds, purifying the drops. What we're doing when we practice the Yidam deity, all of this is working to overcome ordinary grasping and fixation. However, you know, this ability for the mind to concentrate, this extends to everything. So like even in a mundane sense in the world, and there is the role of the wind in that too, as you mentioned, like, so if you're doing any activity, if your mind is concentrated, you can accomplish that activity. So for instance, like if you're cooking, and your mind is really like together with what you're doing, you know, then you won't make a mistake and you'll be able to like cook something really nice. But if your mind is all over the place, if you're distracted and you're cutting vegetables, you might cut your hand, you know, or like if you're driving a car, if you're not really present with driving and you're distracted, then you can get in an accident. So it is like when this sort of concentration of the mind really, and that there is the role of wind in that too, and that does definitely, in both like a dharmic sense and a worldly sense, it helps us to be able to like achieve our objectives.
I think the internet, especially those of us who are online a lot, it makes our attention dispersed because you can do many things.
Jaja yana sim yapo ne matibana sunzo yujure. Jaja la mampotana tani yangi kana kabana tani te sim la yapo ne matibana chagi yosare.
Kanshina na chung kapsa naran gom ya ko.
When she was young, she could meditate really well.
Jone ta jaga lalap nyan ta pa shedar ko
Then she went to India and she went to class every day, like, you know, and was studying. And she had to like really think a lot, like every day she had to use her intellect. So like, for instance, if I tell her she's impermanent, so they had to do like a lot of thinking in just in the context of debate. So like, if for instance, the question, like if I say something is impermanent, then she has to challenge me with kind of positing the possibility of permanence, which requires a lot of creative kind of analysis. So actually, by also a lot of intellectual, like a kind of a intellectual training can actually diminish the ability for just like resting the mind and concentration. So when she first went into retreat, she had a lot of difficulty. Like at first in Tibet, she was really good with meditation. Then she studied in India and she got worse. And then when she went into retreat, she had difficulty. And then like after she got over that. But maybe she didn't understand what I said about the internet. I don't know. But anyway, yeah.
Similar.
Yeah, similar. So yeah, she said it's the same thing. There's a lot. Because there's so much information. Like when we look at the internet, everything's at our fingertips, so we can go bounce from this thing to that thing, and also like get really anxious because there's so much to see about like all of the terrible things that are happening in the world, and then you know like there's you know maybe it can create stress and fear and anxiety, and so there's the mind easily becomes very distracted because of all of the information, all the stimulation through, you know, spending time on the internet. And she said it also destroys your eyes.
So what is the connection between the breath and the winds? I mean, is there, you know, I mean, I understand that the mind can control the winds, but what is the actual connection? I mean, is you have the air coming in, is the air, I mean, does it become the winds?
breathing out, long chol tang da da, ngab la da, this revive Quran. So goddess na tata chlo ke jong ai na long de, mo to la long mi khang ba go gyong jian mi long do sa mi na so pe ni ka ta de ne, na ta le ge. Long cholon chai yung sa mi pan do sa mi na khang ba go gyong kan na mo to na ta le ge.
So there's a very strong connection between the winds and the breath, for sure, and they are like one and the same on a course level, like the breath is a course type of
Force
wind.
manifestation.
And there's outer and inner, right? So like there's the outer space and outer wind, outer air, which is really important for the also health of the body. Like if, you know, for instance, there's no, like if you get enclosed in a space and there's no oxygen, you know, then you can die. It's not, you know, that it can't function. So there's a really strong connection there for sure. Yeah, they are essentially one and the same, and they do become unified also through the practice. That's what we're doing essentially.
Are you transforming people with the breath? I mean, transforming the course?
What's that?
Are you transforming the course into the song?
Rapa lung rapa the ina lung rapa insare tini rapa the yang chawa ro chaya kitidu dina chiyure.
long pan do instead of chawa the yoma the kind of that long yang of the dang tini that so really you got walk than just long than then yam the turn tini korang karism yishi the long.
So it's not really so much that, but it's like, you know, there's this connection. There's like the outer winds and the inner winds and like the breath, all the different types of winds in the body. And one of those is the actual course breath. But what we're doing is we're going from sort of delusion-based experience of the winds to wisdom winds. So we're transferring from, you know, into the wisdom winds is what we're doing.
From the karmic winds to the primordial wisdom.
Yes.
And
Affliction, emotion,
Yeah,
which karmic winds?
Yeah, you're trying to transfer, into just the primordial wisdom.
Yeah.
Right.
Niemand betaalt is dat je gaat dat niemand lang horen. Tene san niet dat de tot samen niemand de bank horen. Ando de ishi de long road. Tene ishi de long de tene motor dat cherry wata. Nemi pada. Tene kare de sem gumote hakoyang.
So, you know, whenever we have afflicted mind states, then that is creating more propensity of afflicted winds. And then when we have love and compassion and positive mind states, then we're sort of diminishing the winds of affliction, and we're primarily like building the strength of the wisdom winds. And when we have more propensity of wisdom wind, then this creates longevity, more, you know, better health, also the ability to recognize the true nature of awareness.
Can you talk about like combining the winds and then combining that with like emptiness meditation?
Diniti yang penasim lung daya dang di tombani mo dinya ki dawakare yore. Tombani gomya.
Tombani goya.
Sem dang lung yang teya ki dawakare yore tombani.
Ate tate nge konshi bang so long de changwa de ba de ni kare Lüde Tonra Gomline ba. Tonra sinya titi Tongpa Niris.
Tongra sena.
Tonra lan Dodo imba Shata Rupa Cha Rangi Ma imba. Jawukara Yi Gomlara. Tongpa Niris.
So actually all of this is connected with meditating on emptiness, because as she said, like from the very basis of these practices where we're no longer identifying with our body as like an ordinary, truly existent body, and we're envisioning ourselves as the enlightened form of the deity, which is empty in essence. So we're hollow inside, and our body is the nature of rainbow light. And so we're already connecting with the truth of emptiness in that. So there is like, you know, the way that we're also visualizing is like emptiness practice too, understanding emptiness.
Actually,
well, we're actually out of time. Yeah, 4:30, and yeah. Yeah, wow, okay, yeah.
Okay, can Drew on, give us some pointers that we can keep throughout the day as we carry the wind flow to help us achieve our nature.
Pena dinda yang nima rede shindu chungam kala pena so gare chego gre pera rangi yang semgi mo yang mo zinya kichidu yang pena lungo ya kichidu di mixer di dama gare yo pena nima rede shindu gare chego gre.
Yeah. 방법들은 심 야고쳐야를 하는
Rede semgi
뭐 도야라 아니 담보로 남겨 상을 따로지
She said, please meditate and reflect frequently on the four thoughts that turn the mind.
이 담보도 잼마다 신이 된 거죠 마다
And really focus on impermanence, really like allow all of your experience to become something that proves to you the truth of impermanence.
잼마다 바데 돈 도서에는 되니 소소라 되수시다미 봐去年的节了等总的休天不这个人
So if you really understand impermanence, then you will be really motivated to use your life, you know, really exclusively for the objective of awakening, because you'll realize we just don't have that much time.
내 점제하 고소나 되니 내 개와게 given 제가 산제진 공방을 도야죠 매개와 그 제가 그 동항이 성선의 제도야 그 제가 대하고데 되니 줄을 좀좀 차를
And if you really understand karma, cause, and effect, you'll be extremely attentive to your actions, you know, of body, speech, and mind, really making sure and very, very careful to always create causes that are virtuous in nature that will that will be onward leading in our progression towards awakening. And you will be very, very cautious to avoid any causes that will like go in the direction of samsara and suffering. You know, so
아니 담전이 가와데더니 물 양답바데 소소가 톱달 하고를 담전이 가와데 하고서나 다라제든 저와 저데더니 물 톱았던 게 담전이 가와데 라트야 칼레카볼 데드더니 담전 쪽제데 데베 물을 지데 간저리데 데 하고서 소소 때문에 소소게 싸야 보자타바데 소소게 냠이야 보자데니 가와 곰튼 되니 소소가 나서 안녕 있어 요레
and by her reflecting on and by reflecting on precious human life, where we have like, you know, we really become aware of how extraordinary it is to have not just a human birth, but the 18 leisures and endowments. So the 8 leisures and the 10 endowments, because just having a human life, it doesn't mean it's a precious human life. But when we really see, wow, all of like the necessary requisites for a precious human life, the 8 leisures, the 10 endowments are present, we have them. And then we have an incredible sense of gratitude and appreciation for our own good fortune and a recognition of how very precious it is. And so we feel a sense of tremendous gratitude and inspiration to like use this opportunity in the best way possible.
When is she coming back?
He will come back soon.
Could you comment on how to approach Unita in a practice?
Well, that's kind of the same question about emptiness. I mean, like in order, you say to approach, like how to realize, or what? Can you say a
In
little
other
bit?
words, you know, when you're doing dissolution and when you're practicing, and you, at that point, it's like you start to work with this whole experience of emptiness. So
Dini pena di durim chepe katla dang chitang nyamlin chene di tongpa. But I just need a question in there, like what's the crux of the question?
Do you make a lot of effort to hold the emptiness? How do you?
Dini di tong, like tongpa ni toyaki. I'm just gonna say what's the best way to realize it. Is that okay? Because I don't, yeah.
Fine.
Di tongpa ni toyaki tachi yakukare yore. Gare chepo gare tongpa ni toyaki chido de nyamlin chene. So overcoming fixation to the body. And also to understand that emptiness is not absence of, it's not nothingness.
So
it's not just like an empty house, with nothing in it, that's just empty. So emptiness is appearance or clarity, and clarity is emptiness. So it is the union of appearance and emptiness. Luminosity and emptiness. So a very famous line or saying is, it can't be said to exist for the all of the victorious ones of the 3 times have never seen it. There's nothing that has been seen or to be seen by the victorious ones of the 3 times. And yet it can't be said to not exist, or we can't say that there's non-existence, because it is the basis of all samsara and nirvana. The go nana
go nana go le chan to go ta to go la sem le ta chan tan che do la
So like this I that we take to be truly existent is not like a thing, like a solid thing that we can identify and say, oh, that's it, that's me. Like if our head hurts, our self is like in the head, or if like, we get tired and we yawn, like I yawned, then we like the I enters the mouth. Or, there's no place when we take apart, where is it that we think that this sort of self is located or dwells. There's nothing really there.